Our pastor, our fearless leader, is sick, and so you get me again. And seeing as it's Christmas, I figured I should talk about Christmas. So you'll notice that title up there, it's not the same title Gary had. I was thinking of just calling it the same thing, but I wanted to talk about a little bit, I guess, what I find is often missed sometimes in Christmas, at least for me. The whole Advent season, I love this time. This is my favorite time of year. I love the lights. I love the colors. And a saying that we often hear, especially as Christians, is Jesus is the reason for this season. Keep Christ in Christmas. These are things that we get up in arms about. We make sure we say Merry Christmas and not Happy Holidays sometimes. Sorry, Les, my mic was pointed at my chin. But sometimes I wonder, and I often like to take some time to sit during Christmas, and it can get busy, but I like to sit and I like to think about what actually happened. Like what child is this? This Christ that's the reason for the season, this Christ that is the name of the day. What is he? Who was he? We know that, angels showed up, and we know that, the wise men saw a star and they went to find him, and we love the story of the shepherds, being amazed and going and telling all their friends, the inn where there was no room and the manger where he was born. But these are all things that kind of surround Christmas. They surround Christ. And we get very caught up in this story of it, which is a great story. I love it. I love the nativity scenes that we have, and we have angels with wings, and there are people that will tell you angels don't have wings, and I would like you to prove that. People, your nativity scenes with the wise men there, and people will say, well, the wise men didn't show up at the manger, and I would also like you to prove that, if you're of that opinion. I feel like I could refute you fairly well, just to at least give me the benefit of the doubt, so that it's possible they were right there at the manger scene. But all of that is peripheral to what we're focusing on. So that's what I want to do this morning, is just focus a little bit on the child in the manger. Not the manger, not necessarily the virgin birth, not necessarily what went on around him, but who is he? And so I'm going to start reading. We're going to read from 1 John. We're going to kind of read the whole passage, 1 John, or John 1, sorry, not 1 John. John 1, 1 to 18, and then we'll kind of go through it a little bit. So let's read. Verse 1, in the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God. The Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light. The true light that gives life to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which is his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision, or a husband's will, but born of God. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. John testified concerning him. He cried out, saying, this is the one I spoke about, when I said, he who comes after me has surpassed me, because he was before me. Out of his fullness we have received grace in place of grace already given. For the law was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, but the one and only Son, who is himself God and is in closest relationship with the Father, has made him known. So there's a lot of things that we can think of when we think of Jesus and who he is. I mean, we're fortunate enough that, we know the end of the story. This year is talking about the beginning, and not just the beginning of the world, but also the beginning of this story of Jesus being here. And at the beginning of the story, we don't necessarily know all the endings, but we have a lot of things that we can think of when we think of who Jesus is. But I'm going to go over a few things that I think kind of come out in this scripture and kind of end with one that I think kind of encompasses all of that. So the first thing is the first thing I noticed, and it's kind of not actually part of what I read. See, in the Bible, we have these verses that we've kind of separated them out. And we've also separated them out into chapters and also these little headings, these little sayings that are this is what is going to come next. This is what I'm talking about. And the heading for this is the Word became flesh. He actually says that down in verse 14, the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. But seems to be saying here that this whole passage is about this happening. What the Word is, Jesus Christ, who is God and was with God in the beginning and created all things, becoming flesh. So the first thing I want to get across is that Jesus, I should probably give you kids the questions you need to answer. Forgot about that. I was about to answer one of them. Do we have those up there? Okay, great. Sorry, kids, I'm new at this. These are your questions. I won't expect the answers till later, so you got lots of time. I'm about to give you one right away, so just remember that. First question, what did Jesus call himself? Second question, what does Advent mean? Third question, when does heaven start? Got it? Okay. Back to what I was saying. Sorry, everybody, for the aside. So the big thing I want you to know about this child is that Jesus was the Son of Man. We don't really get this in this John passage. He talks a lot about Jesus being God and being with God and before God. But the Word became flesh, and there's a way that it happened. He was born just like us. And so Jesus is the Son of Man, and we know that. We like to think, that we can wrap our heads around this, and sometimes I think it's very hard for us to do at the same time. We know Jesus was man, but we also know Jesus was God. And a lot of times, we don't think of them together. We think of one or the other. And I think thinking of Jesus as God is probably what we think of 80-90% of the time. And Jesus being man is, 10-20% of the time. We get it. We know it was a thing, but Jesus is God. The funny thing is that's kind of the way we often look at it, or at least I do. But Jesus often talked about it in the reverse. Do you know that Jesus' favorite thing to call himself was the Son of Man? I tried looking it up. It's about 80-ish times in the Gospels that he refers to himself as the Son of Man. Way more than any other thing he refers to himself as. There's a debate on whether he actually says that he's the Son of God. There may have been once or twice that he says that in sort of reference to something else, not even just directly. Now, he very often says, talks about God as his Father, but he doesn't identify himself as the Son of God to others oftentimes. What he does is he identifies himself as the Son of Man. But what does that mean? See, I think a lot of times we hear that and we think that's Jesus' special name. He's the Son of Man. That must mean something otherworldly. It must mean something godly. It must mean something, godly. Like I said, it must be something other than just being human. But that's exactly what it means. It means he was human. He was like us. The Son of Man, just like you are and I am and everyone in this room. He wasn't saying, I'm the Son of Man, and putting himself separate from us, even though he could be and often should be. But he was bringing himself to equality with us in situation. See, he's someone that knows our situation, not just because he saw it, but because he experienced it. Because he is human. And I think far too often we glaze over that part. And I think sometimes, especially at Christmas, it's a little easier to see it because when you're reading the Gospels and he's healing the blind and walking on water, it's a little hard to be like, oh, there goes that human. There goes that regular dude. But when you see a baby in a manger who needs to be wrapped up so he doesn't freeze, whose parents have to carry him, who needs protection, we get the sense that we understand Jesus is like us. He is human. He is a son of man. The second thing I want to point out that I kind of got from this passage is that Jesus is light. I mean, we see that in the actual verse sooner than we see the Word became flesh. It says, in him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. It's another one of these things at Christmas time that I think is so good to focus on because it's dark outside a lot. And, we decorate with beautiful twinkling lights. And, I love sitting kind of by myself and just reflecting. But, the light's off and just the Christmas tree on and having this sort of beautiful ambience. And one of the things that always strikes me is that it doesn't matter how small the light is or how dark it is outside. If the light is on, the light's visible. Darkness, it is not a thing that has power to fight back against this light. The light is just on, and you see it. See, I think we have a problem with darkness. And it's not necessarily a problem that we don't know is there. We just have a problem because we don't know what to do about it. See, the darkness in this world is something that is so evident to a lot of us. I've had a lot of friends or acquaintances, people who are not Christian, who don't share my same faith. And one of the things I hear a lot, probably one of the most often things I hear is, if God was real, why is there so much suffering? I mean, it's a good question. Like, what do we do with all this garbage that goes on? There's war, there's people being sick, there is struggles. You look on the news and you see it all over the place. You can walk down a lot of streets in any major cities and there's people struggling left and right as you go. There's pain, there's hurt, there's cruelty. And so what do you do with this? And one of the things that always strikes me is that when I hear someone say that, whether they're an atheist or they believe in some other religion, I hear them say this. They say, well, if God was real, what's all this suffering doing? Why is there so much darkness in this world? And in my mind, I think, okay, I mean, that's a legitimate question. But my question is, well, if he's not real, does that fix the darkness? Like, do you have another answer for me? Because you're telling me mine's not good enough, but is yours? See, the thing is, if God was the reason for the darkness, well, if we discarded him, it would go away. But it doesn't. Oftentimes it seems to get worse. See, the thing is, our problem with darkness is that we largely create it. I mean, I don't always create all my own pain, but a lot of it is humanity caused. You hear people talking about, generational trauma. You hear people talking about, these societal things that, people who came from a background, if their ancestors were subjugated, if their ancestors were oppressed, now they're feeling the effects of it. And there's some truth to that. We make mistakes every day that hurt ourselves and hurt other people, but this has been going on for a long time. There's a darkness in this world. There is a suffering in this world. And we're kind of at fault. None of us gets to walk around innocent or unaffected by it. So what do we do? Well, it says, in him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. See, God is not making the darkness, but he is the light that we can see through it. He hasn't left this world. Because if he did, it would just be all darkness. But it's not. There is light here because he is here, because he came to us. Jesus is God's gift of grace to us. And he's a gift that never stops giving. There is a verse that kind of confused me a little bit. I was not sure what they actually meant when we read it. Verse 16. It says, out of his fullness we have all received grace in place of grace already given. And I thought, well, that seems weird. If you have grace, why do you need more grace? And so I started looking it up in different translations, and I found the Message was one I really liked. So the Message basically says, we all live off his generous abundance, gift after gift after gift. God gives us grace, and we take it because we need it, and then he gives us more. And we take it, and we need it, and then he gives us more. Jesus is God's gift of grace to us, but it's a gift that doesn't stop giving. We think of Christmas time as a time to give, and I think we should, but realistically, Christmas time is a time that we received. We were given a gift of grace, a gift of a child to become like us. And that gift doesn't end 2,000 years ago. It doesn't end with the Christmas story. It doesn't end, after every Christmas season. It is a gift that keeps giving. The grace that we have been given is continually renewed. I'm kind of a weird person, as a lot of you know. And I like to think about going to heaven a lot. And some of you think, okay, well, that's normal. Who doesn't like to think about heaven and imagine what heaven will be like? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about what heaven will be like. I'm talking about how do you get there? I often think about, okay, there's coming a day where I'm going to die. And then when I die, I'm going to go to heaven. But what does that look like? And truth is, we just don't know. It could be an instant. It could be, we hear a lot of, near-death experiences. People talk about a light at the end of the tunnel. But really, we just don't know. And I think about it a lot. I wonder. I have a very active imagination, and I come up with ideas of what I think it might be like. And one of the main ideas that I kind of have in my head, and it always comes around Christmas time because it's cold and snowy and dark outside. But I imagine it's like walking in a forest. We live in this world, there's darkness, there's a little bit of light. We can see it, but there's a lot of darkness, there's a lot of cold. And I imagine it like walking in a forest. You just find yourself in the middle of there's some evergreen trees. The snow is about a foot deep. It's nighttime. The moon's out, and you can see a little bit, but there's some snow falling. And you're just trudging along, walking along. You're not really sure where you are. You're not really sure how you got here, but you're supposed to be going, so you keep walking. Your hands are cold, your feet are a little bit cold, but you're working up some heat, you're trudging. And all of a sudden you see kind of over our eyes, there's just a little bit of a glow. And something inside you just says, that's where I need to be. You know that the dark is getting darker and the cold is getting colder as you trudge, and you know that you can't be out here for too much longer. And so with some more determination, you walk towards that glow. And as you come over the hill, you see home. For me, it was always my grandparents' home in just outside of Red Deer. They had this acreage. And at Christmas time, we'd always go sledding down their hill. And as a kid, you'd stay out way longer than any of the grown-ups. So you'd start in the middle of the day, and everyone would be out there. And slowly, people would start trickling inside. And sometimes you'd be the last one out. And you'd look down at the bottom of the hill where everything's real dark. And then you look over where the house was just over there, and they had the lights on, and you could see into the kitchen. The deck kind of had a glass door leading right into the kitchen. You knew everyone was kind of inside in the dining room. You could see the treats and the Christmas snacks sitting on the table. You look down and you're having a fun time sledding, and so you'd go on your sled and you'd slide all the way down, and you'd go further than the Quonset, and as soon as you passed that Quonset, you couldn't see the house because it blocked it. That's when things got scary if you're a kid, because now you're out in the middle of the night in what felt like a long ways off from everybody, and it was dark. And so you realize this was your last run, and you just left the sled there and booked it back up the hill, ran into the house. I picture going to heaven being kind of like that. You're trudging through the snow, and you look over the ridge, and there's the house. It's a house you recognize. It's a house that maybe you can't place, but you know it's home, and you can see there's a light on in the house. There's some twinkly lights strung on it. There's some smoke coming out of a chimney. Gives you some energy. You start running towards this house. You get up, and you're not sure, is the door going to be open? But you pull on it, and it opens for you, and you step in, and you smell the smells of food. Didn't realize how hungry you were. The warmth comes rushing in. You can take off your gloves. You can take off your hat. Everything is light and warm and safe, and you can hear laughter coming from the other room. Voices that you recognize, but you haven't heard for a long time. People that, left before you did. People that took the same walk in the snow that you did a long time ago. And then someone walks across the hallway carrying just a big stack of games. And as they walk, they kind of stop and look and notice you and give you a big smile. And that's when you realize that that's Jesus. You've never seen him before like this, but you recognize him instantly. You know him. And he's standing there smiling at you. And he kind of gives you a little wink and nods his head over, saying, "Come, follow me. We're just getting started." And you can rush in. And to me, I go, yeah, that must be what it's like going to heaven. Coming out of the cold and dark, where there was some light to follow, but now you're there, you're home, where it's light and warm and friendly. See, I think one other thing that we understand about Jesus and who this child is in the manger that we look at every year is that Jesus is heaven. He's heaven. That's what he is. That's what heaven is. Heaven is not just a place where we go to have fun, a mansion in the sky that was built for us. Heaven is where Jesus is. Heaven is being with him, is being with God fully. That is what heaven is. But then I got to thinking, well, if that's what heaven is, if heaven is where Jesus is, then what happens when Jesus comes here? See, we're in the Advent season, we call it. And a lot of times we think of Advent as a time of waiting. We're waiting for Jesus to come, but the word Advent actually means something different. It comes from the Latin adventus, which means coming. See, Advent isn't about us waiting, it's about him coming. It's about him arriving. The truth about heaven, and probably where I'm wrong in my idea of how we get there, is that we can't actually make it. We never could. We couldn't walk far enough or long enough or good enough to make it to that house. We didn't know the way. We didn't have the ability. We were just not good enough. But even though we couldn't make it to heaven, heaven came to us. The meaning of Advent is coming. And that's exactly what happened. Heaven came to us. Jesus Christ brought it with him because heaven is him. It's where he is. And he came here. That's one of the big miracles of Christmas. Maybe the biggest miracle of Christmas is that he came to us. and that heaven is no longer a thing that we wait for when we die. Yes, it's going to be better probably after we die by a lot, because that's when heaven will be full. But heaven doesn't wait to start until then. Heaven starts right now. Heaven starts right here. Because Jesus came to us so that we could start heaven long before we get there in full. And all of these things are things that Jesus is. Jesus is the Son of Man. But there's more, because we also know he's the Son of God. We know that Jesus is the light in this dark world, the thing that we can cling to and look to when everything else around us is scary and cold and dark. We know that Jesus is heaven. We know that that's what heaven is. Heaven is the place where God is. And I think the main thing that we learn from this is the thing that Jesus really is in our lives is the answer. He's the answer. You got questions? Well, he's the answer. I don't need to know the questions yet to know that he is. There's kind of a joke, we talk about a Sunday school answer. And basically what that means is that if you're ever in a church class or Sunday school and you get asked a question that you don't know the answer to, just say Jesus. You'll probably be right. And we laugh at it because it's a big joke, and realistically, they're probably looking for other answers when they ask you that question. But also realistically, you're probably right. I rewrote a song a couple of years ago now for Christmas. What I often do when I write Christmas songs or rewrite Christmas songs is I find one I'm not like a super big fan of, because then, I can rewrite it and make it something I like to sing, and then I leave the ones that I really like the way they are. And so I was thinking I wanted to write a song, and so I looked at We Three Kings, and I thought, that's always been kind of a, lackluster song for me. So I decided I was gonna redo this thing. I was gonna make it awesome, and I started kind of heading into it. And as I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, I kind of got an image about who these people were. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized, they're in the Bible for a reason. There's a lot of stuff that happened in history, even, around Jesus, that is not in the Bible. Why are they here? What is the purpose of them? And a lot of times when there are people in the Bible that we don't understand, a lot of times they're telling us something about ourselves. And so I wrote this song and I called it We the Kings, because what I came to realize is that they're there because they show us who we are. We're people who are walking in a world that's broken, a world that is full of darkness, and we are looking at lights, trying to find how we can get more of that. And that's who these people were. They were living in the same kind of world we lived in. They were looking at the sky, trying to find answers, just like we were. And the song became a song about kind of the human condition. Especially us here in this Western world, we are very much like kings. We have wealth beyond understanding of people even a couple hundred years ago. Do you understand that none of us, I am assuming, have had to go out to an outhouse in the middle of winter? Recently. But even a few decades ago, things were different. None of us are going home being really hope it's not too bad outside, because, I got some bowel issues and I might need to be sitting there for a while and it's going to be a chilly one. We don't have to do any of that. We have so much. The poorest of us in this room can go out and get a meal. There's a lot of times I open my fridge and then close it back up again, and open my cupboard and close it back up again. And a lot of times it's not because I'm hungry, it's because I'm just bored. If we have the luxury of opening a fridge because we're bored, we're pretty blessed. But even going down to a homeless shelter and getting a meal made for you is a lot more than a lot of people have in history or even in other parts of the world, to be able to know that, if I'm really that hungry, I can go down, someone's going to feed me. How many people have these shiny rectangle things in their pocket? Most of us. Again, a lot of the people who would be considered poor and struggling still have a supercomputer in their pocket. We have so much wealth, yet we're so poor. That's what the kings were. They had wealth. They brought a lot of it to give to Jesus, but what they had was worth nothing compared to what they got, because they got to know him. We also call them the wise men a lot of time. They were very smart, and I think, again, that applies to us so much today. Not even just that, like, me individually am so wise, but these, again, rectangular, shiny things that we all carry around have a wealth of knowledge. If I wanted to learn how to do something, there's this fancy thing called YouTube. You can just type in what you want to learn, and it'll show you someone doing it. I had to fix my lawnmower a couple years back now, and I have no idea what I'm doing when it comes to these kind of things, but we figured it out. We got it working, and it was working better than it had ever worked since I had it. And I mean, I did get it secondhand, so it was never brand new, but we have so much knowledge available to us, but we are so lacking. And I think there's a part of us that knows that. And for most of our lives, it's a life of searching. It's a life of striving. What are we looking for? We're looking for answers to the questions. We're looking for somewhere we can belong. We're looking for someone who understands us. We're looking for the answer to the darkness that's in this world. And that's what Christmas is about. God coming to us, giving us the answer. Jesus is the answer to it all. So when people come to me and they say, well, if God exists, what's with all this darkness? And my internal question is, well, if he doesn't exist, the darkness is still here. The only difference is that God gave us an answer for the darkness, and if we don't have him, where do we get our answers from? They always fall short without him. See, he's the answer to our darkness. He's the one who understands us. He's the one who knows us. He's the one who's been in our situation because he's human. But he's also the God who can do something about that situation. He came to us. We didn't have to go to him. He came to us so that we could be with him. He became like us so that we could become like him. We started off reading in John talking about the beginning of time, at the beginning of everything. So I want to kind of end off reading one of John's later writings, talking about the end. I'm going to be reading in Revelation 21. We're going to be reading verse 1 to 7. Here's what he says. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven, the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away." He who is seated in the throne said, "I am making everything new." Then he said, "Write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true." He said to me, "It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I will give water without cost from the spring of the water of life. Those who are victorious will inherit all this, and I will be their God, and they will be my children." That's what this child is. That's who he is to us. In our regular, ordinary lives, he came into, and he became that, so that he can make everything new. He started heaven here, and we can find it. Jesus was born from a regular woman, born in a regular old town, in a regular old place and time. But we find the answer to all of life questions in the middle of our regular. We find the extraordinary in the middle of our ordinary. And because he came to us, we don't have to wait till the end of time to live out this. Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. We don't have to wait for that to start. That's right now, because Jesus Christ came. Let's pray together. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you. We thank you for your answer. God, for every question we've ever asked, for all the hurt and the pain in this world, God, for the suffering, for the struggles, for the unknown, God, you have an answer that is more than sufficient. An answer better than any answer we could give. And God, we thank you for Jesus Christ, that he came to us and brought heaven with him. God, we ask that you would allow us this Christmas to remember who he is, and that we can go out and share him with everyone we meet. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
It came upon a midnight clear, that glorious song of old, from angels bending near the earth to touch their hearts of gold. Glory to God in the highest, glory to God evermore. Good news, great joy for all. Glory to God through the silence, Christ the Savior is born. Jesus, the love song of God. Jesus, the love song of God. Jesus, the love